Great. So it looks like the room's filled up nicely. And I'd like to now go on just to introduce our speaker for today. It's my pleasure today to introduce Johan Marais. He's a leading reptile expert in Africa and is a conservationist, photographer, and author of several books on reptiles, including the best-selling Complete Guide to Snakes of Southern Africa, which is also available in Afrikaans. Collectively, his books have sold over 500,000 copies. Johan is the CEO of African Snakebite Institute and advises hospitals and clinics throughout Africa on snakes and snake bite. The new book about the reptiles in the Kruger Park is available for pre-order, and the discount that the special that is offered is available for when you book now or pre-order through Botsock as well as the Snakebite Institute website. And if you pre-order now, the books will be available in about a week to 10 days. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box for us, and we'll deal with them after the talk. And with that, over to you, Johan. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to this.
Thank you very much, Brett. Thank you for the invite. Yes, snakes and other reptiles of the Kruger Park. This has been a very exciting project for us to get involved with. But I think to start off with, I just want to quickly introduce my colleague, Luke Kemp, who did most of the work on this book, and we also used most of his photographs. Luke is, he did his honors at Rhodes University, a formidable herpetologist. We've worked together for the last 5 years, and we're working on a whole bunch of other books. So yeah, watch the spot. You'll see some very exciting reptile books in the near future. So with regards to the reptiles of the Kruger National Park, it all started off with Dr. Udevi Pinard. He was a junior ranger back in 1955. Worked in the Kruger for over 30 years. And during that time, he produced this book, The Reptile Fauna of the Kruger National Park, initially as the sole author. And subsequently, he got Dr. Niels Jacobsen to assist him with the updates. And they did phenomenal work. They did great surveys. They got awesome photographs back in the days when we didn't have many good photographs of reptiles. And these were really pioneering works that made people familiar with at least some of the reptiles that we knew that occurred in the Kruger National Park at the time. I started, my first book came out in the early 80s, and we had so few books in those days, it was really difficult to get more information. So the work that Niels Jacobsen and Tol Pinard did for the reptiles of the Kruger Park, those were just, it really was pioneering work. In more recent years, we've had quite a bit of additional research done, and I'm thinking specifically of the work that Jody Barnes did. He was one of Dr. Brian Maritz's students, and in 2018 he did a citizen science project on the reptiles of the Kruger Park, and there was another paper by Darren Peterson back in 2020. And so there you can see with the map on the right, the little dots you see are localities of reptiles recorded in the Kruger Park. Obviously, having an area the size of the Kruger and with a lot of dangerous animals around, it's not that easy to survey. You know, you've got to be very, very careful where you survey. And surveying reptiles takes a lot of time. It really is hard work. You can spend 1 or 2, 3 or 3 days in an area and find very, very little, because there are so many different factors that influence their movement, their visibility, and reptiles, generally speaking, are quite secretive. They're not that easy to find. The map on my left is all those little dot localities where we've recorded reptiles. But then if you look at the colorful map on the right, that is a predictive map. So those are that gives you a far better indication of where we expect high diversity. And you can see that in some of the areas, extreme northwest, they predict that there could be 65 to 80 species of reptiles in that limited area. But again, if you look at the predictive map, it's very clear that the Kruger Park has phenomenal reptile diversity. I just received the first copy of the book. Just the couriers brought it in about a half an hour back. Really, really excited. I'm very, very impressed. Strike Nature really know how to put together wildlife books. And what I particularly enjoy of this book is that they got the color balance of the different reptiles absolutely spot on. And that's quite important because very often when you look at books, the colors just aren't the way they should be. But in this case, yeah, very, very impressive. Finding reptiles in the Kruger Park is no easy task. As I've mentioned, they are quite secretive. People tend to focus on the big five. They tend to focus on birds, a lot of birders. And if you want to start seeing reptiles, you're going to have to put a fair amount of effort in. Rocky outcrops have lizards coming out of cracks, tracks on dirt roads where snakes have crossed. And the majority of reptiles are very well camouflaged, which makes it very, very difficult, especially snakes. And what we find with snakes like the arboreal snakes, the vine snakes, the boomslang, even the mambas to a large degree, their presence is often announced by birds. Birds see them and they just go crazy. First of all, it's the bulbuls, and then some of the sunbirds join them. And eventually you've got the barbets, and you've got the various hornbills, and they go crazy. So if ever you're sitting somewhere at a waterhole, you stop somewhere and you hear a lot of noise from the birds, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to be an owl or one of the raptors or a snake. So they do that. Time of the day, obviously in the mornings and summer, a lot of reptiles will come out to bask, snakes specifically. Lizards will bask in the early mornings, but the moment they reach their optimum body temperatures, they then start moving back into the shade, and they're in and out, in the sun, in the shade. So you've got to be fairly wide awake to spot a lot of them. In winter, you'll find that a lot of the lizards will bask later in the day, 10, 11 a.m., get that nice winter sun. Even snakes, our snakes don't really hibernate. They're just a lot less active in winter. So even in winter, if you look at the top of anthills on the sunny side, rocky outcrops on the sunny side, there's always the chance of you spotting a snake basking. Yeah, cryptic coloration. This is what makes reptiles so interesting, because they just blend in with their background and they're very, very difficult to see. So on the left there, you see a little spotted or variegated bush snake. It is in fact a very common snake in the Kruger Park. Even in the various camps, they tend to even go and live up in the rafters. They between the thatch and the walls. They feed on little frogs and they feed on geckos. So where you have an abundance of prey, you're going to have snakes. And in the camps, you tend to have a lot of tropical house geckos, little reed frogs. So yeah, you'll see them. I'm just thinking of where I've seen most of the spotted bush. There's probably Skakusa. Well, sort of seen most of them. Time of day, very important, because some of the reptiles, like chameleons, for instance, they are so well camouflaged that you've got very little chance of seeing them during the day. But if you have the opportunity to go on a night drive with a spotlight, they tend to coil up in a fetal position, like you see the one on the left. And when you shine these spotlights at night, they reflect more light than the leaves. So once you get your eye in, chameleons are very, very easy to spot at night. They just stand out. In a recent drive that we went into the Kruger recently, I did a talk for a crowd of paramedics, and we had about a 2-hour drive, and I must have counted well over 20 chameleons in that period of time. That's a little dwarf day gecko. These geckos are abundant, and they're very common in camps, but you need to look around to spot them. They love basking, and in a lot of the camps we have a number of reptiles that are common. A lot of the skinks, some of the lizards. So yeah, keep your eyes open. If you're in the various camps, you're sitting around at the coffee shops, look around, look in the branches, look on the sunny side, look in the leaves, listen for the birds. It's not that difficult. We see a fair number of tortoises in the Kruger Park, and the common one obviously is the big leopard tortoise, the baarskilpad. And what you often find is if there is a little bit of rain, they come out into the roads and they drink from the puddles. Sorry. Yeah, so these tortoises are really, really common. All of our reptiles are protected in most of the provinces. So certainly in Mpumalanga and Limpopo, every single reptile is a protected species. One is not allowed to capture them, to remove them, to handle them. But in addition to this protection, we also look at their conservation status. And if you take something like the leopard tortoises, they are abundant. They are least concerned. They're not anywhere near threatened or endangered. They have a wide distribution, but important to remember that all of our reptiles are protected species. Crocodiles. Probably the best place in South Africa to observe crocodiles is the Kruger Park. And they've gone through a tough time. You know, we've had a lot of habitat destruction. There is conflict with rural communities. And in the eastern side, sorry, in the western part of the Kruger Park, we've had major problems with contaminated water, with heavy metals coming down from the mines. And for several years now, we've had problems with fatalities with crocodiles, picking up various diseases. We probably have less than 10,000 crocodiles left in the entire South Africa, including all of the reserves and all of the protected areas and natural areas, Dumu, St. Lucia. So we really don't have a lot of our crocs. They are listed as vulnerable, and we are keeping a very, very close eye on the crocs. With the snakes, we have 22 harmless species in the Kruger National Park. And by far the most common is the brown house snake that you can see in the photograph there. Now, these snakes have no venom whatsoever. And it's an easy snake to identify because it has that light line running from the nose through the top of the eye to the back of the head. So you can't really mistake these snakes for any other snake. They are nocturnal. So it's unlikely that you're going to see brown house snakes during the day. But again, in a lot of the camps, these snakes are abundant. And part of the reason is that they are rodent eaters. And the moment you have people, you have food waste, you have rodents being attracted, and that brings the snakes in. And this is a very adaptable snake. They've hence the common name. We very often find them in suburban gardens. You know, people have birds in an aviary that attracts the rodents. They have pet food that they leave out for the dogs, and that attracts the rodents. So the snakes move in. So the average brown house snake will be about 30 to 50, 60 centimeters long. They do grow well in excess of 1 meter. The spotted or variegated bush snake. So this isn't the only harmless green snake that we have in the Kruger. We also have the eastern Natal green snake and the green water snake. They're all in the same genus, Philothamnus, and they are largely gecko specialists, although they'll also take frogs, and the green water snake will also feed on fish if it has the opportunity. So the spotted bush snakes are usually a bright green with these dark spots on them, but from the middle towards the tail, they go very dull in color. They might even be a sort of a golden color, and they lose the spots. Day active, very, very fast moving. If you disturb them, they disappear in no time. And it's a cheeky little snake. You know, when we survey these snakes, if we grab one of them, they bite very, very quickly, although they have no venom whatsoever. The common egg eater, or the rhombic egg eater. So these snakes are active at night only, and they are egg specialists. So where you have a lot of bird nests, you're going to have egg eaters frequenting those areas. They're quite brilliant at locating eggs, and it's all done with the tongue and the Jacobson organ in the roof of the mouth. So if this snake is on the ground and you have a nest up a tree with fresh eggs in it, it will smell those eggs. It will locate them and go and eat them. And what they do is they swallow the egg whole. into the neck region. And once they get into the neck region, they have bony protrusions from the vertebrae that they use to crack the eggshell. They then crush it and swallow the contents, and they spit the shell out. People often confuse egg eaters with night adders. The big difference is that night adders, despite their common name, are active in the day, and they don't really climb up trees. So they are quite different snakes. The little wolf snakes, the common wolf snake, more often than not, you won't see all these white spots on them. They're just about black. And again, a nocturnal snake, they are lizard feeders. They specialize on skinks. And another snake that you could encounter in camps. And you have to be careful with little dark snakes, because we have a snake in the Kruger Park called the stiletto snake. In the past, we spoke about a mole adder or a burrowing asp. And these snakes are venomous. If you touch them, they bite. So a very strong message. Never, ever touch any snake that you come across, no matter where you are, because people do make mistakes and we do see accidents very, very often. Right, the blind snakes. So the blind snakes live very deep underground, and they feed on the ant and termite larvae. And you don't see them that often, but with heavy rains, they do come to the surface, and we do quite often see them. And these snakes can be in excess of 0.5 meter in length. And some people would call them two-headed snakes because they're not quite sure where's the head and where's the tail. They're completely harmless. And so their strategy is to go into an ant nest, and they feed on the ant larvae or the ant eggs as quickly as they can. Their jaws can move rapidly, up to 6 chews a second, and they gorge themselves on these eggs as quickly as they can, because while they're doing that, the warrior ants are stinging them, and they have to eat as much as they can before the pain becomes unbearable. And at that stage, they then have to vacate the nest and get out of there because they're just getting far too many stings. So yeah, we do see these crossing roads on overcast days. We see them after the heavy rains, but again, completely harmless. The largest snake in the park is obviously the python, the southern African python, and that's a common snake in the Kruger National Park. If we look at the literature, they talk of our python reaching close to 6 meters in length. I've never seen one that big. I think even 5 meters is exceptional. If you look at the bottom left picture, there's a python with her eggs. They average about 40 to 60, 70 eggs. Those eggs are the size of a tennis ball. And what's interesting is they usually lay their eggs in artfrog holes. And when the female lays her eggs, she loses close to 40% of her body mass. And she will then coil around those eggs and remain with them for the next 3 months of incubation. And during that time, she'll come out during the day to bask, to gain heat, go back into down into the burrow and share that heat with the eggs. But she won't feed. So she'll really lose condition. And the eggs take 3 months to hatch. And once the babies hatch, they're over 0.5 meter in length, they will hang around the burrow for a week or two, with the female down there. And if they get to come out and bask and they get disturbed, they will quickly go back down the hole and go and hide in her coil. But after that, there's no real parental care. The babies are on their own, they disperse, and they will go and do their own thing. 17 of the snakes in the Kruger Park are what we term mildly venomous. And my definition of mildly venomous is less than a bee sting. It really is nothing. These venoms have virtually no effect on humans. What you see there is a little black-headed centipede eater. Another very interesting snake. They specialize on centipedes. And their venom, although it has no effect on humans, is highly effective to kill centipedes. So when they grab a centipede and envenomate it, it literally dies in seconds. Not the type of snake that you're easily going to see, because they're largely nocturnal and very, very secretive. But when we do these surveys where we're flipping logs and rocks, we come across quite a fair number of black-headed centipede eaters. beautiful snake. So this is the eastern bark snake, also referred to as a mopani snake. And they live under the bark of trees. They feed largely on lizards, especially geckos. And they come out in the day. They bask in the day. And again, if you're going to put a bit of effort into it and you scan those logs on the sunny side on a cool morning, there's a pretty good chance that you might spot one of these eastern bark snakes. A mildly venomous snake, and the venom has no effect on humans whatsoever. Another common snake in camps, especially in showers and where you have thatched roofs, this is the marble tree snake. They very, very good climbers. They live under the bark of trees. They go up trees. They come out at night. You don't really see them in the day. And they put up quite a show. If you happen to accidentally corner one, the snake will coil back into a striking position, as you see there. They flatten their heads. They strike out viciously with an open mouth, but their venom does nothing to people. Probably one of the more visible snakes that you'll see in the Kruger Park is the western yellow-bellied sand snake. They average 0.5 meter to about 3/4 meter in length. They are really fast-moving, probably one of the fastest-moving snakes that we have. But they do tend to, they're active in the day, and they do tend to enjoy water. So if you had water holes at dams, there's always a good chance that you might see one of these snakes approaching the water to come have a drink. They feed largely on lizards, but they will also take other snakes. Nice rule to remember: any snake that you come across in Southern Africa that has stripes from head to tail, be that narrow stripes or broad stripes, if they're striped from head to tail, they're not highly venomous. So that's well worth remembering. This is the olive grass snake. This is another harmless of the sand snakes. And these snakes can go quite dark in color. They get over 1.5 meters in length, and they are very fast moving. And if you see a large snake crossing a road during the day in the Kruger Park, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to be one of these olive grass snakes. And people often mistake them for black mambas. They see one of these snakes that'll cross the road with the head lifted well off the ground, very, very quick. Might be dark in color, and people think they're dealing with a black mamba, but it's more often than not an olive grass snake. And sadly, probably the snake that gets killed by cars most often in the Kruger Park, because they're so active, because they move around so much. They often end up under the wheels of cars. And of course, if you drive over a snake with a car's tire, you will break the snake's back and the snake will die. So once you drive over a snake, it has virtually no chance of surviving. And then we have venomous snakes. There's 6 of them that they're classified as venomous, but not highly venomous. So a bite from one of them could result in pain, some tissue damage, a bit of swelling maybe, but no more than that. You could end up in hospital. I mean, that photograph is a stiletto snake, and these snakes live underground. They come out at night, again, especially after heavy rains, and they have fangs that can protrude from the sides of the mouth while the mouth is closed. And because of that, you cannot safely handle the snake in any way. If you pick it up behind the head, it's going to protrude those fangs, twist the head sideways, and one of the fangs will get you. If you pick it up at mid-body, it's going to thrash around, and one of the fangs will get you. And although it's not a potentially deadly bite, it's an extremely painful bite, a very destructive, cell-destroying venom, with some of the victims losing a thumb or even a finger. So it certainly is not the type of snake you want to get bitten by. The garter snakes, when they're juveniles, they're very, very colorful with those bands, but as they grow up, they lose the bands. Very secretive snakes. So not the type of snake that you're easily going to see in the Kruger Park, although we do find a fair number of them crossing roads at night if we're doing night surveys. Snouted night adder. It's obviously closely related to the common night adder. It is a much smaller snake, and if you look at the tip of the nose, you can see where we got the name snouted night adder from. Fortunately, because of their small size, their bite is usually not that bad. It's a very painful bite, but not near as severe as a bite from a large common night adder, which may even reach 1 meter in length. So these little snakes are frog specialists. They hang around where there's water because they feed largely on frogs. Quite easy to identify. The snouted night adder has a very distinct V marking right on the head. So you'll see that very, very clearly. So one of the things that we've done in the book is we've made use of a lot of photographs, different color varieties of reptiles, different poses, because identifying reptiles is not always easy. So we've tried to make it a lot easier for you to be able to flick through the book, and you go to the snake section, there's a snake with a V marking in the head, you know what you're dealing with. And then we have highly venomous snakes, and there's 7 of them. Now, it's quite fortunate that bites on guests in the Kruger Park are extremely rare. We don't often hear of these bites, but obviously these things can happen. So, the most famous venomous snake in Africa, probably in the world and common in the Kruger Park, is the black mamba. And these snakes hatch at 0.5 meter in length, and they're light gray when they hatch. And as they get older, they become a medium gray to maybe a darkish gray, occasionally even an olivey brown color. And the average adult will measure about 2.2 to 2.8 meters in length. Very rare for us to see black mambas in the Kruger Park over 3 meters in length. It's not an aggressive snake. It is a very nervous snake. It avoids people. It's quick to escape. But obviously, if you're going to threaten, if you're going to accidentally corner one and threaten it, you could have a lot of problems. It is one of the deadliest snakes in the world. And what we find in severe bites is that if people don't receive the correct first aid treatment and subsequent medical treatment, we do see fatalities in anything from about 1 to 7 or 8 hours. Very few people get bitten by black mambas and very few fatalities. In the whole of South Africa, we have about 6 fatalities a year from black mamba bites. And obviously, in a bite from one of these snakes, it's critically important to get to a hospital as quickly as one can, which is not always easy in the Kruger Park because the distances are vast, and you've got your nearest hospitals will be in Tzaneen or down in Nelspruit, depending on where you are. So this is the snouted cobra that we used to call the Egyptian cobra in the old days. We changed the name because it's not really related to the Egyptian cobra, and in Afrikaans we refer to it as a Vipneus cobra. One of our larger cobras can reach 2.5 meters in length, and very rarely bites people. Quite common in the Kruger Park. You'll see them crossing roads. You'll see them basking, and you also get a banded variety that in Afrikaans they refer to as a lappieslang. The Mozambique spinning cobra. This is a problematic snake. If there's one problematic venomous snake in southern Africa, it's the Mozambique spinning cobra. It's active in the day and at night. It is a common snake. It is a prolific hunter. It eats just about anything: snakes, lizards, frogs, birds, whatever it can get hold of. But because of its active lifestyle, it does occasionally end up in people's tents or in chalets. And this is more accidental than anything else. But once they're in there, people do get bitten in their beds. So word of warning, if you're going to go into a chalet, there's no harm in just checking, putting the blankets away, look under your beds. If you're camping, zip up your tent, because you don't want a bite from one of these snakes. They don't easily kill people, but their venom is incredibly destructive, causing severe tissue damage. And a lot of the victims end up with several operations and skin grafts after a bite from one of these snakes. So this really is a snake well worth avoiding. It also spits its venom. It spits up to close to 3 meters in length. Should that ever happen, you rinse the eyes with water, nothing else, and you go to a medical doctor to examine your eyes and to give you some antibiotic drops or creams. And in 99% of the times, there are no major complications. Venom in the eyes, the victims recover within 2 or 3 days. As cobras, We never really knew this, but because the forest cobra sort of hugs the KwaZulu-Natal coast from Belita northwards, and then many years back, a forest cobra was spotted at Punta Maria, and we've subsequently seen a few of them. So they're just into the Kruger National Park in the extreme north. Shiny golden brown with a blackish tail, and not much of a problem snake because they live in dense vegetation and they're quite quick to escape. The worm slug, although it's technically a very dangerous snake because of its potent venom, they just do not bite people. So if you see a worm slug anywhere in the Kruger Park, even if it's in a camp up a tree, there's no danger. Just, you just don't want to tamper with them, but they just do not bite people. Obviously, we have a lot of bird nests. There's a good chance that you might see the odd worm slug. They feed on the fledglings, they feed on the eggs, and they are largely arboreal. The vine snake, again, highly venomous, doesn't bite people. This snake is extremely well camouflaged. So it's going to be one of those snakes that you won't see very easily unless the birds give away their presence. They're not aggressive at all, but like any snake, if you tamper with them, they will fend for themselves. Predators, very, very common, widespread, the most common highly venomous snake in southern Africa. There's been a lot of very interesting research done on them, and this was all done by Prof. Graham Alexander at Wits. And what they found is that these snakes spend most of their lives camouflaged, just hiding. And they can spend weeks and weeks under the same shrub. The average puffadder can live in an area half the size of a tennis court for the entire year. But the males during the breeding seasons will move quite far in search of females. One of the males that was tracked in Denekang Reserve moved over 20 kilometers in one breeding season and ended up back where it started. So, yeah, the type of snake that you, again, don't see that easily because of their camouflage, but from time to time, we do see them crossing roads. And a word of warning, if you are in the camps, if you're staying in the Kruger, do yourself a favor, use a torch when you walk at night, because the last thing you want to do is to accidentally stand on a snake. Crocodiles, we've mentioned. We only have one species in most of in most of Africa. There's another species, a few other species further north and west, but in southern Africa, we only have the Nile crocodile. They don't easily exceed 5 meters in length, and the males get much bigger than the females. Very interesting. The sex of the young, as is the case in most lizards and in tortoises as well, is determined by the temperature at which those eggs are incubated. So if you're going to incubate Nile crocodile eggs at 31 degrees Celsius, you'll only have males. And if you incubate them at 27 degrees, you'll only have females. We have two legavans in the Kruger Park. We have, this is the rock monitor, felt licavan. It frequents rocky areas, it goes up trees, and most of the photographs that we see of rock monitors taken in the Kruger Park are individuals coming out of holes in trees. So quite often you'll just see their head and one foot sticking out. And they're these slow-moving creatures. They go along looking for whatever they can find. Bird eggs, they eat crabs, they eat bugs and snakes and lizards, whatever they can get hold of. And you identify the rock monitor by the sort of chunky head and the stubby nose, whereas the water monitor has a much longer snout, and they tend to frequent rivers, dams, areas where there's quite a bit of water. These lizards get over 2 meters long. They pose no real threat to people. They're very quick to disappear, but a very interesting reptile to observe if you are at the Kruger Park. They really are common. So we have 15 typical lizards, and the two most common lizards in the Kruger Park would be top left and bottom right. That we call the rainbow skink. And the bottom right is typical of the females and subadult males. They have the electric blue tail. And the breeding males, top left, they develop those really, really bright golden colors. So those would be the dominant breeding males. And it's a rock-living lizard. So wherever you're going to see rocks, there's a pretty good chance that you might see some of these rainbow skinks. The bottom left is the striped skink. And if you want to photograph the striped skink, they're common in the camps. And if you go to the kudu bronze statue in Skukuza, there's a half a dozen of these that live in those rocks. And they're quite habituated and quite easy to photograph them. We have largely two agamas in the Kruger Park. So this is the tree agama, the blauwkop kochelmander. And again, they love the camps. They're totally habituated. And if you're careful, you can get within 1.5, 2 meters of these lizards to photograph them. And the males in the breeding season get those beautiful blue to purple colors, as you can see on the right there. So they're very territorial. They live in these trees. They run down onto the ground, feed on the insects. They eat a lot of ants. And the females run down into the ground and dig a little hole in the ground to deposit their eggs. And once they've laid their eggs, they cover the hole and camouflage it very, very carefully. Some people think that these lizards are venomous. They're completely harmless. We have 6 girdle lizards. Now, these lizards are often also called dragon lizards. They're really, really special. And if you find little rocky outcrops, especially those little outcrops in shady areas where the rocks are quite dark, you have a fair chance of seeing these. And they're really, really nice to observe. The flat lizards of the genus Patasaurus. The males are very colorful. The greens and the oranges, where the females are lighter dark brown with stripes down the back. Super active, and again, very nice to observe. So if you get to areas with these rocky outcrops, especially where you have those big rock faces, take your binoculars and see if you can spot the flat lizards. We only have one chameleon in the Kruger Park, the common flat-neck chameleon. And the colors on chameleons are, although they're naturally camouflaged, so they do blend in well with the environment, but the changes in color don't really have much to do with camouflage. It's more about male aggression, males attracting females, the mood of the chameleon. So if you look at the top right one, you've got one that's nice and calm, sort of normal green colors, but the top left one and the bottom left ones are on stress. They've been disturbed. The aggressive colors are coming out. So the moment you tamper with them, or if you have 2 males coming across one another, they will change their colors to those aggressive colors. So these chameleons are egg laying. They also dig holes in the ground, lay their eggs, and then cover the hole very, very carefully and camouflage it well. 15 species of legless lizards. So these aren't snakes, these are lizards. If you look at the structure of the skeleton, it's quite different from a snake. And most of these legless lizards you're never going to see in the Kruger Park because they live in loose soil, they live in leaf litter. But the one on the left is the giant legless skink. And we do often see them on roads, we see them in camps, again, especially after heavy rains, and they're completely harmless. 15 species of geckos, very common in some of the camps. So except for the little dwarf day gecko, the other geckos are active at night. And the common one that you're going to see in most camps is bottom right is the tropical house gecko. These geckos are prolific. They breed like crazy, and they're very, very common. The middle gecko is the big, that'll be the Turner's gecko. They get quite big. We see them on shadow walls. They do bite. If you try and grab one of those, they will bite. And then the top right one is another gecko that you'll see in camps from time to time, and that's Wahlberg's velvet gecko. It's a beautiful gecko. It's a big gecko, and the skin texture is very velvety. So these geckos frequent the shadows because the lights attract the insects, and that's what they feed on. These species of terrapins, very often one will, if you see hippo, you will see some of these terrapins even basking on the hippos. So some of the one species is not very commonly seen, but the marsh terrapins are quite common and abundant. So if you add water holes, you're going to see them. They sort of omnivorous, but they will take insects, and they're even known to, in some places like Etosha, they will catch doves and birds that come down to the water to drink. So yeah, very, 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 very common, very, very abundant. Right, let's see. What else do we have here? Tortoises. So we have the three species, the two hinge-back tortoises at the bottom left. Very difficult to tell them apart because we have both Natal and Specs hinge tortoise. But the common tortoise you're going to see is the leopard tortoise, and they get really, really big. Very common in parts of the Kruger National Park. Tortoises are egg-laying, and the eggs can take very, very long. They can take close to a year for those eggs to hatch. I just very quickly want to touch on snakebite. Obviously never touch any snake that you come across. Don't handle them. If you do have a snake in camp, notify the rangers, let them deal with it. In most of the camps, you do have medical facilities. We do have medical doctors in the Kruger Park. So any snakebite incident, the most important thing is to report it to the camp manager and let them help with further emergency procedures. With regards to first aid for snake bites, it can become quite complex, and it's well covered in my book, Snakes and Snakebite. It's not something that we could really cover comprehensively during this talk. And that's me done for now. Just some of the books that are available. The Complete Guide to Snakes was revised last year. Snakes and Snakebite came out 2 or 3 weeks back. And the Top Right Kid Snakes is, at this stage, one of the most popular books that I've done. So it really is an excellent book for keep an eye out for that. Brett, I think that's most of what I had to share. I'm sure there will be some questions, and I'm happy to take those.
Yes, thank you, and that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I did forget to mention, if you'd like to please post questions in the Q&A box. We can get to them now afterwards as they start coming in. We've got one straight away here from Melissa. Which reptiles are you most excited or likely to spot in the Kruger National Park, and which would you be the most excited to find?
Well, it's a good question because it depends very much on where you are. So, if you on some of the rocky outcrop, you have the giant headed lizard. It's a dark gray lizard. It's gets over 1/2 meter in length, and they live in these small little colonies. But there are some absolute specials in the Kruger Park that we don't see very often. There's lizards that we desperately need photographs of, and we need to go to the remote areas like up in Punda, where we will have to scratch around quite a while to find some of those skinks. There's a blue-tailed skink that occurs up there, and I think we only have 6 records ever of that skink being found.
Is that a function of scarcity, or just the reptiles' sort of nature that they are harder to find, or is it?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. So this skink occurs further northwards, and the Punda area is the southern tip of its distribution. So you're right on the edge of its distribution, but it's not a common lizard. It's not something that you're going to see quite easily. Very secretive.
Fantastic. So as we're waiting for some more questions to come in, how much time now do you spend between sort of the admin and the practical side of what you do? Is it a case of you spend the admin and the writing, or the exploration work?
Brett, it's a bit of both. Both Luke and myself are working in a number of books, so we're trying to get out as often as we can to photograph reptiles. We obviously have certain target species. Later this year, I'm hoping to get up to Epupa Falls in northern Namibia. There's a snake there that was described called a Kruger racer. That the only photographs of the snake are the ones from the specimen that it was described from, and we haven't seen it since.
Wow.
So we want to get up there and photograph that. But yeah, we do spend a fair amount of time in the field as much as we can. We also have a reptile research farm in the Springbok area called the Kruger Biological Research Station, where we accommodate students to do their field work. And the whole ASR team tries to get to Kruger as often as possible. And we try and get down there for a week or 2 or 3 at a time. We have over 80 reptile species on the research farm.
Fantastic. Cam's asked here, is there going to be an update to the Reptiles of Southern Africa book?
Yes, Luke and I are busy with a very exciting book called The Reptiles and Amphibians of Southern Africa. So it's not an update of the present book. It's a whole new book. We are covering close on 800 species. The book will have close on 2,000 photographs, distribution maps. It's going to be quite a book, and we're hoping to finish. We're 90% there, but we're hoping to finish the writing and the maps by the end of this year, and we're already accumulating photographs. So we're probably looking another year and a half down the line before that will appear. But keep an eye open for that. It's going to be great.
Awesome. And then in terms of venomous or dangerous snakes, what would you describe in sort of Southern Africa? So call it in South Africa, what would be the snake that is, I don't want to say dangerous, but which is the one that has the biggest impact on human settlements, which are we most likely to come across and should be aware of?
If we look at snakebite statistics, our biggest problems are both the puff adder and the Mozambique spitting cobra. Puff adders, people accidentally standing on them. Mozambique spitting cobras really is a big problem because they end up in houses and people get bitten in their beds while they're asleep. And when I say people, we have 30, 40, 50 babies a year getting bitten in the rural areas. We have people staying in luxury game lodges adjacent to the Kruger Park getting bitten in their beds. And our recommendation is, if you're going to be in those areas, zip up your tent, sleep under a mosquito net, also prevents malaria. Take precautions, use your torch, look around, and just be careful.
Right. Marguerite says here, which of the reptiles are mostly mistaken by people, and will your book be able to clear that up?
Yes, it's difficult because this book could be 10 times thicker than it is. So we've largely gone for the common ones and the ones that you are most likely to see in the Kruger Park. And yes, the book's going to be very, very, very useful if you come across any reptile in the Kruger Park. Flick through, and we haven't gone into all the gory details of scale counts and all the technicalities. We provided ample photographs where you can look at a photograph and make your identification.
Right. Nora has asked here, is there going to be a book or an article about the human-wildlife conflict based on reptiles?
We always touch on that in the various books that we produced. I don't think that we'll ever do a book purely on that. And it's very interesting if you look at people's fear of snakes. It's a great deal of research has been done, and it's a bit of a combination between nature and nurture. So we are genetically programmed to, or hardwired to, very easily become scared of snakes. But we can also be influenced very easily, which happens in most communities. An aunt or an uncle or a grandfather will shout when you're a kid, watch out, there's a snake. And that hardwiring kicks in. The fear of snakes can be overcome. One of the things that we do at the African Snakebite Institute is we have these snake awareness courses that we do. And we find that some people are so terrified of snakes that they will come to the course, drive halfway, and go back home again. But when we get them into the course and we start sharing the information, one realizes that a lot of these fears are a lack of knowledge. And the moment we understand them better, you're not necessarily going to particularly like them, but you're going to understand them better. And we do see massive changes in people's attitude once we get them to understand snake behavior. The fact that if you're 4 meters away from any snake, you're perfectly safe. There's no snake in Africa that will approach you from 4 meters away and bite you. So there's all these misconceptions of snakes chasing people and inherent aggression that they have. No, they don't have that. In the greater Durban area in the last season, more than 200 black mambas were removed from people's houses and from their gardens. Yet we didn't have a single black mamba bite, not even one.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Durban, and we were told, see a black mamba, it's going to chase you. They were told there were these aggressive snakes, and you spent years in the rivers and nothing ever chased you.
In Limpopo province, the farmers tell me that the mambas, it's just a highlight. That's not true.
It's not. Mel said you have magnificent photos with their colors so clearly defined. How do I find them in the spots where you can see them so clearly? In my garden, they all look either brown or black.
That depends where you are and what diversity you have. I also grew up in Durban, and where I grew up in Montclair, we had very little diversity. We had 3 or 4 common snakes and 3 or 4 common lizards. But then, as I mentioned, at Quickerboom in the Macqualand, we have over 80 reptile species just on one farm. So it depends where you are. Read about them, get to know their habits. The more you get to know them, it's like any animal. The easier it is to find them, the easier it is to spot them. So just read up as much as you can.
Great, thanks. And then Dar says here, are steps being taken to reduce water contamination from the mines?
I very much doubt that. The first time that I went down to the Kruger when we had crocodiles dying was 30 years ago, and they're still dying. So we really have major, major problems.
What a pity. Well, Johan, there's no more questions here. There are just many, many comments from people saying, thank you for the talk, unbelievable knowledge. Thank you for sharing it with us. What an awesome presentation. So I'd just like to share that with you. Oh, here we go. One more from Sue here. I agree on knowledge of snakes. Gives confidence when snakes is in the house or the garden. Have done the snake handling course and now can easily rescue a snake with my kit and take it to a safe place where it can be safely released. Fantastic, Sue. My daughter and both of my daughters and I have both done your snake course as well, and found it. You were correct. There were people who were petrified, and by the end were touching and interacting with the snakes on a far more comfortable level, which is a great thing to see happen. Another question is coming here from Josa. I found a small brown house snake outside a house at Montague. I was wondering why it was showing no aggression. I suppose because.
Yeah, a lot of the snakes, they have no inherent aggression. If it's a harmless brown house snake and you handle it gently, there's no point. What we must also remember about venomous snakes evolved for killing prey. That's why they have venom. It actually has very little to do with humans, and they will waste their venom on a human in absolute desperation. So if you stand on a puffer and you hurt it, it's going to bite you. But if it's 5 paces away from you, the last thing it wants to do is waste its venom on you.
Typical humans to think that everything revolves around us. Oh, Johan, thank you so very much. It's okay. Sorry, one more question. Brilliant talk as always. Do any doctors in the Kruger carry the SAVP mono or polyvalent antivenom?
Right. We'll finish with this one. I have time, but we're running out. What you must all remember about antivenom is only given by a medical doctor in a hospital environment. So if you don't have hospitals in the Kruger Park, you don't need to keep antivenom. 4 out of 10 patients that get the antivenom have severe allergic reactions. And because of that, we only give it in a hospital environment where we have everything under control. But the other important thing about antivenom, 9 out of 10 snakebite victims that are hospitalized do not get antivenom because they don't need it. 9 out of 10. So antivenom isn't the big deal. The big deal is that if you get bitten by a mamba, the venom might stop your breathing. That can kill you. So we want to get you into a private ambulance or into a hospital where we can stabilize you and ventilate you. And once we've done that, we've sort of won the battle. Then we can worry about antivenom and other stuff like that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Johan. Thank you for sharing your passion. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your time with us. And we look forward to welcoming you back on to another talk in the future. Thank you to everybody for joining us. We will see you in our July talk, first Wednesday of the month, same time, same place. You'll get a link to the recording of this, as well as all the necessary information for our future talks. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.